All right, everyone. Welcome to FEMTECH Live Lounge, a monthly discussion that celebrates the intersection of technology and the AI industry. This series is presented by Virtual Patent Gateway. Our event today is hosted by Ann McCrackin, a patent automation, IP operations, and IP docketing process expert, as well as a highly accomplished patent attorney with extensive experience in both US and international patent prosecution, who serves as an adjunct professor at the UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law. With over 25 years in the field, she honed her patent prosecution skills at Schwegman, Lundberg, and Wessner, PA, and served as the founding president of Black Hills IP Technology. Anne is joined by Olga V. Mack, a digital transformation executive, LinkedIn top voice, and repeat TEDx speaker. And with that, I'll pass things over to Anne.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. I am excited to have this chat with you today, Olga. And I'd like to first start just by having you tell us a little bit about yourself.
And likewise, and I actually think we live parallel lives. Today I build the future of law. I recently sold a company called Parley Pro to LexisNexis and helped to integrate it. And in the past, I'm a tech lawyer by design. I started as a classically trained tech lawyer and intellectual property, security, and privacy. Have spent some time litigating, not creating, but destroying patents. And then become a product lawyer for numerous well-known technology companies in the Silicon Valley, then became general counsel, and then over time became a strategist and a chief executive that builds the future of law. I believe you live a parallel life.
It sounds like it. Who knew? So, today our title is AI and the law. And there's a lot of different things that we can focus on, and there's a lot of exciting things going on in the law right now. But let's start with current events since we're both in the IP space or have been in the IP space. One of the big announcements that came out in the past, I think just a few days last week, was the USPTO finally came down with some guidelines on the role of AI and whether or not AI can be considered an inventor for patents in particular. So, and in to sum it up, they basically said there has to be a significant human contribution towards inventorship. So, Olga, I'm curious, do you think that this will have an impact in any way on how companies and inventors are keeping track of the innovation process, for example, to be able to show inventorship and document inventorship if they're working with AI assisted technologies?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and we have seen parallel discussions in the United States Copyright Office, also emphasizing the role of human. I think where we're trending just generally as human race is that we're beginning to value our most important asset, human time, in a much more intentional way. I think up until this point, we sort of artificially assume that some humans are more valuable than others. We sort of bought into the idea that with some education that highly correlates with social status, some folks contribute more to society than others, and therefore deserving to be, either protected or compensated for that. Now that we automate quite a lot of things, including things that we didn't think were possible to automate. And we had experience of pandemic when we realized that, that barista who serves us is actually really valuable because my day is not the same if I don't get my cup of tea, coffee or tea. And she is as valuable and her time as valuable as a brain surgeon or lawyer that I only occasionally need. And so, it's interesting to see USPTO and the US Copyright Office try to lead with the contribution of human and try to separate that as a distinct thing from what automation computer bots do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really easy to say, sure, significant contribution of human warrants protection. That statement logically makes a lot of sense. And really easy to say yes to, because our, IP laws that are constitutionally based reward innovation. However, I think, having been part of many innovative experiences that then resulted in various filing or litigations or protections or whatever, what I know, and you probably know, is that innovation process is not as clean.
Yes.
Sometimes, a small contribution, like a little pivot, is actually reframes the whole thing. And it's a teeny tiny thing. And it leads to discoveries that would not be possible otherwise. It's small in size and duration, but it has massive impact. And I think this is where the phrase significant human contribution becomes really challenging. So let me stop philosophizing and giving abstract thoughts, giving more specific thoughts. So say I am inventing something with an assistance of a bot, of a chat GPT or some sort of form of AI. And say I am prompt engineering based on my experiences, I'm able to write prompts that other people are not able to. Is that a significant contribution? You can argue both ways. So I think it's really easy to agree on the high level principle of significant contribution. But when you sort of get in the nitty gritty detail of innovation process where a little pivot or specific knowledge can make a big difference in the course of history and conversation with a bot, I think it's really hard to have that conversation. It's really hard to determine at what point, if it's predominantly written by a human, then it's easy. But if it's nudged by a human in a way that's not able to be nudged by others, I think that still may be a significant contribution. I'm wondering about your thoughts, but I really struggle with that word significant and how to actually operationalize it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think certainly it's clear, and particularly your comments support that significant does not mean the amount of time that is spent necessarily. You could have a significant contribution even without a lot of time spent. And, to me, I come back to the fact that this is all software. And it's kind of like we've been patenting inventions that have been made using software for 30 or more years. And the human is writing the code that generates something that might be patentable. And we've been doing this for many, many years. So now instead of writing code, we're writing prompts, but we're writing instructions. We're just writing instructions in a more of a plain English style to cause the computer to do something, to cause software to do something. So I do think that there can be innovation in the way somebody constructs the prompts and creates a result that is new and novel, for example. So yeah, I think that that term significant is going to not necessarily mean the amount of time that you spend, but more will be a measure of the output that comes from the human input.
Yeah. So, and it will be interesting to see how the United States Patent and Trademark Office actually, implements this, practically speaking. Do you have to certify about time, or, what it means to certify about significance of the contribution? I also, I guess, the United States Copyright Office had, similar commentary and have similarly solicited from the public various insights with the United States Library of Congress. It will be interesting to see what the results of that is. And I would not be surprised that the aggregate result of all of this is actually for us to rethink what it means to be creative, what it means to be innovative, what it means to be deserving of protection. That is, again, very much rooted in in constitutional rights. Those are federal statutes, and it will be interesting to see how our legislators and regulators grapple with these issues.
Yes, for sure. Well, I want to steer our conversation in a slightly different direction now, because I know we both have a passion for education. And I want to talk about how, as the legal profession starts to have more reliance and use of AI, is there a concern that we're going to lose some of the basic legal skills that people have as they're coming out of law school, for example? And, maybe putting this in the context of, the contract type skills. If somebody learns how to write and negotiate a contract, for me, my contracts class in law school, I learned how to write a contract. I learned how to negotiate a contract. Does it change what we need to teach lawyers with respect to those fundamental skills now that we may incorporate more AI-based tools in our practice?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I actually learned how to contract on the job, which I think is actually a more common experience for folks, which explains the variance in skills and and experiences. So it's really interesting. I maybe take a step back. At some point, for example, the way we research case law has changed. We used to have books or periodicals, and I actually, when I went to law school, I actually learned first how to do book research, which was pretty archaic even at the time, 20 years ago.
Right.
When and then they showed us the labs for Westlaw and LexisNexis, and I was like, oh, I can do that. But that book part, I'm definitely not enthusiastic spending the rest of my life doing, flipping pages and stuff like that. So all of that to say, so if you only give me books, I probably will fail. I'm actually not I don't remember how to do it. That is an obsolete skill today. If you give me a system, modern system, I'll probably figure it out. So that is to say that the skills I need to do research today have changed from 30, 40 years ago. And me having only a slight introduction to the old ways, so I can appreciate the new ways, is just fine. And I think if you, like, same thing with contracts or anything else for that matter, the new technology necessitate, we start rethinking the way we do things. And we teach people what they need to know to do their jobs. And by the way we contract is very much changing. We are seeing a lot more standard clauses. The contracts are being digitized as opposed to basically used as paper digitally, but actually simplified and digitized and automated. And I actually think that then you need to know different things to contract more efficiently 5-10 years from now. I think my skills in contracting will become increasingly obsolete. But what do you think?
Wow. Well, certainly there's a component of standardization, right, that plays into automation. And it's interesting that you say that the clauses are becoming a little bit more standard, and we're seeing that as probably an effect of the application of technology and tools to contracts. So I think that's an interesting observation that I hadn't thought about. Some of those skills, like writing a contract, for example, or negotiating a contract, I think those skills are still there, but the tools then that are available, so the skills that I learned with respect to those more substantive tasks are still there, and they're still necessary, and the tools that are available just make me more efficient at doing them versus doing them all manually. But on the other hand, looking at your example of legal research, which is a great one, I don't know if anybody shepherdizes cases manually these days.
Thank God. Thank God. And imagine that world.
It makes me wonder if law students today are even being taught how to do that, because you don't need to. So that's a skill you don't need anymore. So I think there's a difference between when technology replaces a skill entirely versus when technology enhances something. and you still need the underlying skill, which is something I've been struggling with actually this semester because I teach a class in patent prosecution, and my students are learning how to write a patent application right now. And there are technologies, very well developed technologies available today that are capable of writing more routine parts of a patent application, like a summary or an abstract, for example. But the more critical parts, like the claims, where there's, obviously the value of the application comes from that, that I don't think can be done by a machine yet. So I struggle though on those parts that can be done by a machine. And I think, do I even need to teach them to write an abstract if they can do it with software? And I've come down on that to decide, yes, they need to learn best practices. They need to be able to, at least at this stage, evaluate the quality of the product that's coming from these AI tools that these AI tools are generating. And if they first learn to do it manually, then they know what the best practices are and they know how to evaluate those tools. And so I still come down on they need to learn the manual skills still. We haven't gotten completely away from that.
Yeah, I know. I think it's process, and I think initially it's sort of a moving target. Initially, you teach by doing things manually, but over time, you have other ways to teach them to focus on things that matters, such as claim drafting, because that's the value of a patent application, really, not in the abstract or summary or disclosure of the prior art. But I think I think that's why I gave an example of research when I don't think law schools today any longer show books. But I was in that point of time where transition was happening, where we were teaching both. And at that point in time, that was a valuable skill. But in the last 20 years, I think that sort of slowly went away and gave rise to other methods of doing research. And yes, sort of the underlying skill is the same, but it's done in a very different way and therefore increasingly taught differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So that makes me think about just workers in the legal sector in general and the types of work they do. How can AI or how is AI improving certain types of work in the legal sector just in general for people today?
Wow, that's a really big question. I mean, we can talk all day about it. And I think we are also talking about sort of a moving target. I think, and you tell me, because, you build intellectual property software, you initially start automating sort of routine things and streamlining. That's where it starts. And I think that's kind of where we're today, and doing, bigger, faster, cheaper type of experience. That's an easy way to sell in the market. And it's usually a low hanging fruit. But using AI just for that purpose is like using your phone as a flashlight. There's so much more you can do. If you have apps and learn a few skills. And I think you alluded to some of that. You with enough training, maybe supplementing with small language models and other technology, it can give you a first draft. It can critique your work. It can kind of automate your research. Like it can actually maybe even capable of doing something a little bit more creative than that. And I think we're just very much in the beginning. When you are just focused on efficiencies, what I know for sure is that this is just beginning. And that over time, I expect kind of more interesting, engaging, creative output. And in the hands of a good operator with really amazing tools, you can do some stuff that was unprecedented and tap into solving problems that we haven't been able to solve before. That's maybe the way I view it. But today, yes, I think it's all about efficiencies today. That's how we sell it. But what do you think?
Yeah, that's where you start, is with the efficiencies. And I've seen, and it's been a while since I've looked at this data, but I've seen data that says as much as 30% of legal professionals, let's say tasks today, are things that are very administrative in nature, and those things are easily, with the technology available today, automatable, so that those types, so that that time then, and you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, human time being the most valuable thing, that time can then be utilized for something more important or higher value. And I think that's where the most gain is coming from these tools right now, but there are so many exciting applications that are out there on the horizon that I think we'll be coming to. But right now, so many firms and corporate legal departments, they haven't even started to take advantage of the efficiency aspect of these kinds of tools.
Yeah, no, we're in the beginning of this digital transformation. And I do think as we move through it and cross the digital divide, that bridge, that's where I think we will stop and think that, hey, we as human, our biggest contribution that we can never get back is time. And all this time is as valuable as Anne and as the person next to her, because we all more or less have the same time. And we have automated a lot of things and a lot of sort of you don't need to have specialized education as much. It really is sort of the supervision and time you give that you can never give back. And I think that value on human time, this is where going back to the conversation of United States PTO and Copyright Office and this human contribution, I think that human time is really becoming increasingly valuable as we can move much, faster.
Yes, absolutely. Well, as we're getting to the end of our time, unfortunately, I wish we had more time. I have one final question that I'd like your thoughts on, and that is, what message do you have for women entering the legal profession, particularly about how they should be adapting to AI in the law and how it will shape their careers as they move forward in their practices? So, what is your advice to women who are just joining or about to join the practice of law?
Yeah, I think when you're in the middle of change, especially such fundamental change and disruption, frankly, driven, yes, by technology, but much more than that. There's sort of social things that are going on, things that are going on in the world. It is not, I actually would encourage not to adapt, but to rethink and eventually lead. I'll give a war analogy. Well, after the war, you don't have just rebuild, you have a reconstruction. You look at what you have and where you're going, and because the city or whatever infrastructure was built at then technology and social realities, and now you have an opportunity to start fresh post sometimes traumatic events. And the thing to do is not to do exactly what you did 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago, but start where you are. And that's why I encourage folks, when they ask for advice for lawyers ahead of them who had very different reality, only take it as one input. Because I did not walk in the shoes of somebody who's graduating from law school today, who is trying to figure out what to do today with the reality of AI. And I would encourage, take all this input, observe where law is crumbling, and it is crumbling at various places. And then instead of sort of patching holes or asking yourself how you fit in, imagine a world you want to live in and build that. Because that's why people go to law school. That's why women go to law school. That's why anyone goes to law school, is because we have a definition of justice and what kind of world we want to be part of. And I would take this massive change in technology and social and in the world as an opportunity to do a reconstruction and lead the change. What about you?
I love that. You are so inspiring. I love the idea of rethinking and leading as a your for women coming into the legal profession. I think that's such good advice. And I love the other way you said it, which was imagine what you want it to be and build that. I can't say it any better than that. I think that is fantastic. And I hope that the women who are taking classes from me and from you and anybody who listens to this particular program, um, they take that advice because there's some amazing women out there who are going to do amazing things. So I can't say it any better than you did.
Well, I'm glad we had this conversation, and it's one of the reasons to do conversations like this is so I can meet women like you who lead and have parallel lives that other folks can learn from. So thank you so much for this conversation.
Well, thank you, Olga. It was great to meet you. This is a fun conversation, and I've enjoyed this time. So thank you very much. And Caitlin, I'm thinking we're at about the end of our time, but I can't quite tell from the screen that I'm looking at here. All right, so we have 1 minute left. So any predictions for the future that you have that you want to throw out there before we end, Olga?
I think we're going to be in sort of uncomfortable transition period for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
I think there will be a lot of building. What I see in the sort of future of law that actually makes me smile and makes me want to get up in the morning is we finally started attracting folks into legal that usually have avoided legal. So there's a lot of technologists now and business professionals who tell me how important law is and how excited they are to innovate. And I like that influx of ideas. I think, to me, that diversity of thoughts and background is really will lead to renaissance in law
Mm-hmm.
and the way we law. And it's not just going to be a territory for subject matter experts like lawyers, but I think the influx of new ideas and talent will really put innovation and the way we law on steroids, and will help us get to closer to law being of service to all. So that's my prediction. That's why I think it's a great time to observe where it crumbles and imagine where we want to be and build that.
Well, I am inspired by your optimism. I'm optimistic about the future too. So thank you so much and have a great day.
You too. Thank you. Thank you for having this conversation.